You've seen the PollPads in action. We'll give a few more details about the PollPad Judge role as well as Election Day registration. Before you begin your shift, please sign the Election Judge oath. If you're working in the morning, you'll need to remove the 2 PollPad Judge folders from the blue box or clear tote. Next, you'll follow instructions included in one of the folders with the setup guide to set up the PollPads.
The PollPad judges are the first stop for a voter once they've entered the voting room. You can set up the PollPads either the night before or the morning of the election. The head judge and co-head judge will take the iPads home with them and will bring them back in the morning of Election Day to be set up. You'll want to set up these tables in a spot that allows for the line to flow smoothly. You'll also want to consider this year the need for social distancing while the voters are in line. In addition, you'll want to place the PollPad tables in places near electrical outlets and also in places that keep the cords out of the way of voters.
Your Election Day registration judge folder contains the following information: instructions to complete these duties, samples, forms, as well as signs. Please post these signs at the Election Day registration table. The signs include a confidentiality notice, an oath from the EDR application, as well as proof of residence documents and how they can properly meet these requirements.
At the PollPad table, you should place the sign that indicates that in order for a voter to be eligible on the primary or general election day, they have to be born on or before that date of 2002. As described in the PollPad video, when a registered voter enters the polling location, you should first ask their name. Then you will search using the first 3 letters of their first name and first 3 letters of their last name. Before checking them in, be sure to confirm their address and have the voter confirm the information on the PollPad screen. Once they've confirmed that, you'll have the voter check in and sign the check-in certificate. Remember, if they need to change their name, like their last name, or register at a new address, they have to re-register and provide documentation for the change. A voter may hand you their photo ID to assist in locating their name, but remember that this is the voter's choice, and it is not required to show photo ID in Minnesota. You shouldn't ask for photo ID for a registered voter.
In Minnesota, an eligible voter can register or update their registration on Election Day. In order to do so, they must have one of the following: an ID with current name and address, a photo ID plus a document with current name and address, a registered voter who can confirm your address, also known as a voucher, a college student ID along with a housing list, which isn't very common in Washington County, a valid registration in the precinct, notice of late registration letter, or staff from a residential facility that can note that that resident lives there.
Prior to registering a voter on Election Day, use the list of acceptable documents to make sure that they have what they need in order to register. If they don't have the documents necessary and also don't have a voucher, they cannot register to vote at that time. Please track how many voters leave without registering and ensure that the head judge gets that information and puts it on the head judge incident log. Remember that voters can always leave and gather necessary documents and return later in the day. Also remember that voters can show you a bill or another form of documentation on their cell phones. An electronic bill or other such document is approved. We'll now discuss the types of ID that you might see when a voter is registering on Election Day. The most common of these forms of ID is a current Minnesota ID or driver's license. First, you'll check the photo to make sure that it is of the voter standing in front of you. Then you'll check the date of birth and ensure that they are 18 by Election Day. Next, you'll check the precinct finder to confirm that the address on their ID where they live is inside the precinct. Next, you can look and see if the driver's license has expired. Although this year, because of COVID-19, keep in mind that residents have 90 days from the time Governor Walz's state of emergency order ends to renew expired driver's licenses. When you're ready to process this voter, remember that you can use the Scan DL barcode button on the upper left-hand corner of the PollPad screen to easily scan the barcode on the back of the driver's license to begin registering this voter. Another form that you will see quite often is a driver's license, permit, or ID that has recently been renewed with the voter's new address. They have the receipt with them as well as their old ID that has been stamped with void. On the voided ID, you'll check the photo and the voter's name. On the receipt, check the application date and date of birth. Also verify the address on the receipt and ensure that it is in your precinct. You'll note with the application and expiration date that this expiration date might have passed, as there have been many delays related to the COVID-19 pandemic. It's okay if their expiration date has passed, as additional time has been granted to residents in Minnesota. Please note that if someone is renewing a commercial driver's license, those receipts do not have a photo on them. They are still valid, though, as a form of ID. A tribal ID with someone's current name and address is also a valid form of ID on its own. Just like with a driver's license or Minnesota ID, you'll check the date of birth and ensure that they are 18 on or before Election Day. You'll then use the precinct finder to confirm that they live in the precinct. Finally, remember that you can use the Scan DL barcode button on the PollPad if there is a barcode on the back of the ID. If a voter doesn't have a form of ID that has their current name and address listed on it, they can use a photo ID with previous information. This ID could be expired. It could be a driver's license, an out-of-state license, a student ID without a current address, a military ID without a current address, a veteran's ID without an address, or a tribal ID without their current address. Finally, a voter could also use their passport to register. In order to use one of these forms of photo ID, a voter also needs to show one of the following approved documents. You'll note that these documents could be shown to you on an electronic device, such as their phone. They can show you a bill. It could be an account or a start of service bill that is due or dated within 30 days of the election. It could be a phone, TV, or internet bill, solid waste, sewer, electric, gas, or water bill, a banking or credit card bill, or a rent or a mortgage statement. A residential lease or rent agreement must be valid through Election Day in order to be used. If you have any questions about any of the types of documents that are allowed, please check out the green sheet that is inside the PollPad folder that indicates all the forms of ID. Another way that a voter can register if they are making a change to their name or moving within the same precinct is valid registration in the same precinct. You'll find this option under the Other selection for residency types on the PollPad. A voter may come in with a notice of late registration letter. This means that the voter registered after our pre-registration deadline. This alone is proof of residence, and all a voter needs to register on Election Day. This letter can also be found in the Other section in Residency Types on the PollPads. The final way that a voter can register if they do not have any of the other documentation listed in this presentation is to find a voucher. A voucher is an eligible voter in the same precinct, and that person can vouch for up to 8 voters. To complete this type of registration, the election judge will complete the voter registration information on the poll pad based on what the voter tells them. They'll then select Other for residency type, and under Residence ID, you'll select Vouched for. The voucher then provides their information to the election judge under the voucher attestation screen. Then they will sign the poll pad. The election judge will record the voucher's name on the green voucher tally sheet after the transaction is complete. The EDR will then print off of the poll pad printer, and the voter will sign that form. The PollPad judge will then check in the voter and process them as usual. A few Election Day registration reminders. Please be sure to consult the Precinct Finder prior to registering a voter. We don't want any voters to vote in the wrong precinct. When entering addresses, be sure just to type the house number and then move your cursor over to the street name. Just type the first 3 letters of the street name and use the pre-entered selections to find the right street name. This will help save you time and data entry, as well as ensure that the voter's address is within your precinct. You'll note that there are a few unacceptable forms of proof of residence that we often see. Voters cannot register to vote at a commercial property address. They can't use any form of insurance documents as proof of residence. And also you'll note that tax statements are not a valid form of proof of residency. When checking someone's photo ID, confirm also that the voter answers yes, that they are 18, and that they are a U.S. citizen.
An election judge, a voter, or an appointed challenger can challenge a voter's eligibility based on personal knowledge. If someone challenges another voter's eligibility, the challenger will complete the form shown on the screen. If this does happen, please call over your head judge for assistance. And if you have any questions, call Washington County Elections.
If a voter is challenged and is able to provide valid proof of residence to clear the challenge, you'll process the voter using the following steps. If the voter needs to register, you'll complete an EDR and have the voter sign the EDR certificate as well as the check-in certificate. You'll make a notation on the incident log and attach the challenge form to the incident log page. Finally, you'll attach a note to the EDR certificate indicating that this voter was challenged but that their challenge was cleared. You'll give the voter their ballot receipt, and then the voter will vote their ballot. If a challenged voter is not able to provide a valid proof of residence, you should complete the following steps. You'll note that a voter must be able to provide a valid proof of residence if they're challenged in order to vote. So in this case, the voter would not be able to vote because they were not able to provide a valid proof of residence. After the voter has been told that they cannot vote because they couldn't provide valid proof of residence, the PollPad judge, if they've already processed the EDR certificate, should write challenge in red pen across the certificate and keep that to the side. If the voter has already signed the check-in certificate, they'll also want to write challenged in red pen on the check-in certificate and set that aside. Then document and make a notation in the incident log. Please also attach the challenge form to the incident log page. Then, before processing another voter, please call Washington County and we will instruct you how to remove this voter from your check-in and EDR counts. If a typo is found on the poll pad or if there is a duplicate voter record, have the voter sign in using the normal poll pad process. Then the election judge should make a notation on the PollPad corrections form found in the PollPad forms folder. You'll note that this PollPad correction form is for minor typos, such as date of birth or minor misspellings of a name. If an entire last name changes or someone's entire address changes, please note that they will need to re-register. For the safety of themselves or their family, a voter can fill out a Withhold Voter Information from Public Lists form. This form can be found in the PollPad Judge folder. You'll note that their name will appear on the roster in the future, but it won't appear on public information lists. To make closing run smoother at the end of the night, as time permits throughout the day, count and bundle your check-in and EDR certificates separately in groups of 25. Keep them in their respective bins all day long, next to the poll pad where they were processed. If the evening is slow, you can confirm your check-in and EDR certificate counts on the screen versus what you physically have in receipts, and prepare for closing. After 8 o'clock, you'll count your check-in and EDR certificates and compare that with the check-in and EDR number on your poll pad. You'll give these numbers to the head judge or co-head judge then to assist in precinct balancing. Part of your closing duties will be to put the forms that might have been used throughout the day into the canvas bag. If you filled out the PollPad corrections form for any voter, please put that into your canvas bag. Please also include any notification of death forms that were completed and withhold voter information forms. Also, if you filled out the incident log, include that in the canvas bag as well. If you didn't use these forms, just leave them in your folder and inform the head judge that they weren't used on Election Day. You'll keep instructions, signs, and unused forms in the PollPad Judge folders. You'll return certificates in the check-in and EDR envelope.